Welcome everyone to another quick live stream summary. Basically also the problem not only of my Linux work but also this channel. So I got this OLPC on that was a battery. Ah, cool. Nothing live. Was it not? Yeah. So the issue with that is I got this from the MIT 15 years ago from my work with Linux and stuff. And of course I didn't really use it much because of this not the amazing software in general, but it's of course nice to have. And so laying some time, also another precious battery. So the battery obviously totally dead as usual, similar to my Apple MacBook battery hacking, right? And so probably also I broke this plastic here a little bit previously. This not really sure why this. So the thing is, you don't get this battery, right? If I would wanted to, I would even buy it, but it's also a little bit strange. This with this thousands of laptops or so delivered. Really not sure. Probably this was under too much tension here. Strange. Let's hope it still works. I guess it still works. So thankfully I could recover the battery. So that is still, so it's just, it fell out. I need to squeeze this battery a little bit. And the OLPC, you might wonder why do I toy with this thing right now. It actually has a proper reason, which is we have a kid now at home. I thought eventually it's 2-year-old, a little bit over 2 years now. And not sure if I should give it to him soon. He likes to, obviously he already destroyed my girl's MacBook Air keyboard, obviously, because it's a MacBook Air and Apple keyboard and stuff. And like, yeah, the only thing is, I mean, it's kind of too nice to maybe give him now because maybe it's destroyed quickly too. But I will see. So that was the reason why I finally wanted to recover this. And obviously it's much nicer with a working battery. So I recovered this. Maybe I should make a dedicated video, but the video is about something else. So I recovered this pre-charge this a little bit. I mean, first I pried the bloody battery into pieces. I also wonder why, although it wasn't glued. So I have some photos here if you want to do this kind of stuff. Yeah, it's of course kind of dangerous with this fully discharged lithium ion, or this is some lithium iron phosphate or stuff. LiFe or so. And yeah, so battery also was zero, didn't charge, similar to MacBooks, right? The MacBooks had a permanent fault bit that you can flash away on older models where you know the fixed battery password, previous videos there. Yeah, fiddled around there. Also, first I had to unlock this. Also, I'm kind of annoyed that they shipped this with some BitLock or whatever digital rights management system. So you, to root this or root, actually I'm not sure, at least to, or maybe to root, anyway, to get to the open firmware OK prompt, you need to unlock it with a developer key. And thankfully this service still works. Otherwise, also, yeah, DRM, right? Imagine their services would be down and I wouldn't get the dev key anymore, and I would need to have this to flash this stuff with a flash program or stuff. Anyway, long story short, eventually after a lot, I nearly already wanted to give up on the bloody battery, like fiddling over 1 hour with this bloody shit. But I could really get this to hold charge, so it fully charged this now. Here with various fiddling, so there are some tips and tricks, but nothing really kind of worked. I had to mess around and try and pre-charge this here, right? Prying this bloody battery open, pre-charging it with a current limited digital lab power supply, as I usually do. You know, lithium iron phosphate. Maybe we should actually check what exactly lithium iron was it for? Yeah, did I say this? Maybe I said this correct. Is it? Probably lithium iron phosphate. Maybe I said this, maybe it's it. Anyway, but I basically only wanted to summarize this. So now I have this. Here's also then some. Basically, I mean, it looks straightforward, but trust me, like I tried that, didn't work, and then you run like there are different bad check and recover and bad charge, and like initially before I had pre-charged this with lab power supply, lots of stuff of this open firmware hack tools they released there, or like they have on their wiki. I mean, many would simply reset, probably because the battery was completely empty. Who knows what exactly overcurrent or embedded controller and stuff. But anyway, and so yeah, finally this charged here. I of course, I mean, not only of course I do this on the hottest record day in Germany in spring here with over 30 degrees in the office. What would be better than exploding some batteries, right? So sitting here hoping the thing doesn't go up in flames. Thankfully it didn't, so it charged like to 98%. I will of course see how long this holds charge. And by the way, I should probably make a dedicated video. This sugar stuff, I didn't like it 10 years ago. Or it's crazy. It was somehow also embarrassing when they released this sugar stuff super slow. Starting NEFs, I think it was Python implementer stuff. Like, I wonder what kid would want to wait here for all this stuff to launch and stuff. But that's a topic for another day. So what I wanted, I mean, first of all, I thought I'd give it to my child maybe soon, see how he reacts. Because the thing is also with the display, it's kind of too nice to destroy. Not only for my collection here, so I need to be a little bit careful, especially with this display here, with this passive display because also I thought now with this record heat, maybe it's actually nice to use this for email, not only to give it to my kids. It's also someone need to work with him to become a good little Padawan and not destroy it immediately, because actually maybe with this globally heating stuff, maybe it's actually nice to, I mean, at least for experts like us, for master code Jedis, to use for text email stuff. Yes, it's super slow. By the way, this is a AMD Geode LX running at 433 megahertz. So yeah, if you see this, so this is without backlight and in the sunshine. It's actually kinda maybe nice. So long story short, I got this to work, and now comes the additional frustration. I mean, not only I probably spent easily 2 hours on this bloody battery. I mean, thankfully, because you can't like buy it, I was already mentally prepared to maybe resell it. Then the problem is you can't get this. Probably you can't get this matching lithium iron phosphate cells. And then the problem is the battery charge controller probably doesn't fit to lithium ion unless you reprogram it and stuff. But the crazy thing is, and this is also more of the topic of the video, how this are currently, so the Linux kernel master Jedi, Linus Torvalds, and projects like this OLPC-XO1 laptop per child projects continue to disappoint me, because the frustration is I spent 2 extra hours, well, basically I spent 4 hours on this OLPC, totally time majorly amazing and invested. And that's also the problem, right? When master Linux distribution maintainers like myself in 2 hours can't get this thing to boot, right? It boots the original software, but I was thinking for my child, I mean, not only the sugar, yes, I get it, kids and stuff, but again, I think the sugar is too slow. It's too, I would actually imagine different kind of kids productivity stuff and puzzles and what I saw from this initial sugar stuff. So I thought eventually, like in some years, like start to prepare this and stuff, slowly and steadily, as broken as everything is, and like let him play Tetris, and maybe some NES emulator should probably, hopefully run fine, or some Amiga games and stuff. So also for, I mean, theoretically driving car or stuff, or like playing something Tetris or other logic programming stuff. And so obviously I want my own kernel, because there are multiple disappointments. One disappointment that I say for so often, the Linux kernel ABI and stuff. So if I take my latest release, it wouldn't even boot because it ships with a 2.6 kernel from 2007 or 2008 or whatever. And the problem is with the Linux kernel, glibc, ABI and API stability and stuff, that you can't just take my latest userland, unfortunately. Although I tried to keep it quite conservative, but even with our quite conservative stuff, that doesn't work. And which is also why we don't update the Linux kernel headers so often and so on. But the minimal version right now for x86, you see we still configure here with 2632, just in case. It still works for some architectures, but for x86 that is bumped up internally to 3.2, so I need at least a 3.2 kernel to run my current user space. Of course, I could boot and load my 5-year-old user space. What would be the fun in that, right? And that is the Linux kernel experience, right? You build latest software and you can't run it. So you could say you built a kernel, right? So what they have done is, if you don't know that, they changed that to MIT. By the way, this was an MIT project, right? And some big organizations, this OLPC, one laptop per child, I'm not sure if they're still particularly active, but of course the idea is amazing, totally supports the idea, just the execution. I mean, I get that the hardware, I wouldn't even blame the hardware the most. That's just what you get when you do ultra low voltage, low power hardware in whenever they started to design that 2005 or whenever they shipped it in 2007, so it takes some years to execute and stuff. I would mostly say maybe I wouldn't use Python and would have jitted Python already at that time. Surely the MIT should have had some clever people to do something more amazing potentially. I mean, given that it has 433 megahertz, which you can even freaking overclock, which is obviously what I've done today when I already have so much frustration, and obviously I overclock this shit, right, a little bit. But the Macintosh stuff or even Amiga and stuff from the 90s was quite snappy stuff, right? So there is no reason, except when you're doing it in bloody Python, that it is as slow as this stuff is, right? So with the kernel, you would think, yeah, just build it, but they executed this maybe for licensing reason, pressing this price tag below $100. They obviously didn't want to pay any licensing fees. I guess that was a major reason. Maybe they also didn't like this legacy BIOS stuff, but they are not using a PC BIOS for this x86 CPU, but open firmware. So this is not sure if it's the first or only ever, but certainly one of the very few devices that is using open firmware. Otherwise only use the PowerPC and Spark for x86. So you can't just boot other stuff unless you use wrappers and payloads and whatnot. So the stuff is even in the Linux kernel, but here the frustration continues, right? Of course, I changed the configuration to build with just that. And they really wonder that regressions and more regressions, right? That the stuff is even in upstream Linux, but it doesn't work, right? At least I couldn't get it to work in 2 hours, which is rather frustrating. So I have here some changes. I probably comment it out just for other people. So there's some config OLPC, geodes. This is just some other surrounding stuff that I'm not sure if I test booted that yet. Maybe I've not yet test booted that because I run out of time. So maybe some open firmware and geo OLPC stuff might not be SMP aware. Okay, that even had effect. I'm not sure if I booted that yet, but the last thing I booted did not yet work. So lots of configs that are not usually enabled. OLPC, actually I probably should check if that forces open firmware on. But long story short, also I added later some frame buffer in the hope that that gives me then some usable output, which I don't even have any output, right? I boot the stuff. I mean, I think when I booted the standard T2 kernel, it simply reset it. Since I changed this config to that, it just hangs. So I now would need to disassemble it to get to serial port or whatever other low-level early boot debug and output stuff. I actually disabled that last year because, not sure, I think I made a short YouTube video maybe, or not sure if I made something. I will certainly do some full review then, now that I have it working again. Because it was so discharged that it didn't even turn on, and I had already like 1 year ago fiddle around, like waste an hour or two just to get it to even freaking boot, and now I'm done with the battery. But, so this stuff doesn't work, and then I found they have here some kernel here, OLPC kernel, they have here 1.5, one was with, alright, I think 1.5 probably was with a VR C7 CPU or something like that. And then they have an ARM version here also, so that stuff is ARM. And so they have a Linux kernel tree, like here. And then I thought, yeah, the last tested might have been 4.8. I thought, yeah, okay, then I built 4.8. But the problem is I have only the latest GCC here, and I would need to install an old T2 release and an older VM to source compatibility, right? Would need to use whatever GCC 4. Whatever that could have been. So this is really disappointing that there is some state, at least as far as I see at the moment. I spent there 2 hours of compile, rinse and repeat and review and diff and stuff. This upstream stuff, surprise, right, is broken, right? And yes, it's vintage, it's retro, but hey, this stuff is not as old as an SG Octane. It's even a decade younger. I mean, not only is it's a decade newer than SG Octane, it's even an additional decade. So it's 2 decades younger, newer than in Spark Station 2. which is of course deleted upstream. And I would also argue that they must have shipped, I don't know how many they shipped, I would hope they shipped tens, if not hundreds, thousands, and maybe are there even shipment numbers? OLPC shipped numbers, units, Wikipedia or somewhere. I would have hoped they shipped some 100,000 units there, and yeah, United States, whatever. Maybe there are some. Actually, you can also turn this around. I mean, this device is not that bad. If you write somewhat optimized software, maybe it's actually endurable. My point is there should be 10, if not 100,000 units out there for kids. And I mean, if it was, I mean, maybe they have other better software, or I would hope it's somewhat successful for people who have otherwise nothing. And I don't see a reason not to support these devices anymore. And so that is really disappointing that this upstream state doesn't work. And it's getting even crazier. I wanted to compile that here and git clone that. It's like I can't even freaking git clone that because unknown object type 0 at offset 4 gigs of something there of this pack here of that hash is corrupt. Remote aborting due possible repository corruption on the remote side. So of huge MIT, previously huge international organization stuff of, yeah, thanks for having a corrupt remote git thing there. Wow. That is really sad. I will probably not continue with this tonight, obviously, and not next week, or maybe not even this year. I will probably just give it my son like that, see how that goes. I will probably, I'm too optimistic. I guess it's probably way too complex for a 2-year-old. At least maybe with typing here or something. I need to see, especially as I don't want to have it destroyed. But I will continue with that another day. The only win-win of the whole thing, I mean, except that now the battery charges, and then also the burden, right, of my vintage gear. Speaking of burden, I probably need to plug in the OLPC-XO1 again before the battery is fully discharged again. That is the thing of keeping, if you want your vintage portable things, previous videos there, transmitter, Crusoe, OLPC-XO1, you need at least once a year or so charge the battery, or best plug the battery out and then charge it like once a year, otherwise your battery, I like it when they at least can hold it like 30-60 minutes. I'm certainly not the original 4 hours, but at least like 30 minutes to carry it from one table to another or plug in the cable or stuff. Yeah, that is rather depressive, but basically continuation of my disappointment. I said this before, if that would be my Linux kernel proper, I would have invented that and stuff. I would somehow maintain it in more of a quality and also like not constantly change it as much. Because the thing is now, you could always argue, yeah, cleanups and improvements and stuff, but now that some people even like sort of experts, but obviously not knowing all the drivers, except I actually know this kind of hardware and drivers a little bit. We also had another, I actually have 2 other AMD Geo things here. Actually need to check if they still work, of thin clients. I even sort of know the hardware, but I don't know all the x86 firmware, open firmware specific things or other details. So, plus I need to disassemble it. I actually soldered a serial adapter. But the thing is also, I'm not even sure where I left this special, because it's a very ultra small footprint cable that I didn't even have. I had to reuse an iBook of all connectors. I think it was a maybe iBook speaker cable that I could like press in there. So that I had still some random stuff here in stock. Yeah, but that's for another day. Maybe I even try first to use an old T2 release and piggyback into that kernel here and first start with an older T2 user space from 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago that would still work with this 2.6, 28-ish or 32-ish or whatever that kernel was. But This is also the thing, and yes, I will now also not only need to work on some of my company stuff, but also on own microkernel and graphical user space, because each time I take a look in such devices, I'm each time disappointed of the state of upstream, right? State of upstream, usually even PowerBook, previous video, right? Graphic artifacts there, Mesa. Here, is this even clickable? Why is there nothing clickable? I think I was here on this already. Yeah. Here, latest PowerBook Mesa with AMD Radeon, and that stuff was working perfectly a decade ago, right? Recurring regression. So, I mean, this code was deleted in Mesa anyway, so I will not continue being that guy fixing all this stuff upstream for free. I've done this for 20 years. I'm done with it. It's just said, recurring, in my humble opinion, everything could be in perfect shape upstream, right? But people constantly keep breaking it in the name of cleanups and optimizations. And it is just said how much work and sweat and tears and blood people put into that, and dedication, that at the end of the day, the big open source promise, 10,000 people, we get everything working in tip-top perfect condition and stuff. It's like, yeah, well, unfortunately not with this kind of agile release management and development. So I continue with this a little bit. I will see what Junior does with it, and probably eventually I get my latest Linux on there. It's just unfortunately not today. And I said it before, I'm kind of sort of in the final getting T2 and pretty, actually, if you're new to this stuff, you have the full Linux distribution, getting T2 in such a state, also with new contributors, that I can finally invest stuff. So the new old just-in-time lightweight JIT stuff, microkernel stuff, graphics subsystem. For example, even when you see this boot, and don't want to reboot this turtle now. When you reboot this, each time I'm reminded, I boot an SG-Octane, I boot a P3, I boot this stuff, how slow even the frame buffer is scrolling, and so on. I actually, for all this vintage and retro stuff, want some new graphic subsystem anyway, so like some lightweight but 3D capable graphic subsystem with 10% of the code and something like that. And that is also more interesting and fulfilling to work on when you're not constantly working with this decade-old and constantly regressing C code and stuff. But yeah, as the only win-win, did I mention, at least there's one tiny win-win that we didn't had. This is using JFFS2, which we also used in some embedded projects, obviously at extra code. And somehow I didn't have this in the initial init.rd. By the way, I hope did I commit this to the, yeah, I committed it to the right tree, because I'm constantly still working on the stable release tag. So now we also include JFFS2 for cases like that. It is the tiniest little win-win, at least, no matter if I waste 4 hours, well, 2 were for the battery, but anyway, there's always some tiny win-win of improving edge cases. I also recently, without a YouTube video, improved some other shell syntax stuff and so on, of more consistent style and modernization and stuff. So, and also I actually split, I didn't even mention this on YouTube yet, on a train ride last weekend to Hanover, from Berlin to Hanover, I also did I make a photo of trains? I think I have a train, yeah, here. Somewhere. I actually, in this train ride, split our Qt5 and Qt6 packages into sub-module packages, and I even freaking tested that. That was some huge improvement that looks to be mostly working. I also improved KDE package metadata for odd stable and made sure data updates all the KDE packages to the latest version stuff. So huge of progress everywhere, just that this upstream stuff continuously fails to impress. Actually, this still looks active, so I actually didn't quite follow that. Maybe I should. So it looks like you can still donate there. I'm just not, where do they have? It's actually not the best link color there. Do they have some press releases or something? Because I wonder, they have here 2021, how active they still are. Look to be a good product, but yeah, I don't quite get why this is not. I mean, why do they not have? I'm actually didn't. Here's also a blog, by the way. Why they don't? Actually, yes, June hazards. What? So they still post your stuff, but they even have here some discussions. They had here some, where was it? Somewhere they had some meeting minutes of a year ago or stuff, and they also argued whether still officially to support this X01. And in this meeting minutes, someone, of course, there was like pro and contra, and there was even like pro. It is in the wild 10,000 or who knows what, and it's cheap on eBay, also currently only 3 for sale in the US. And yeah, even they argue in their last years or so meeting minutes of they should support this. But my biggest grief here is that this is not proper upstream, and that their Git thing here is corrupted. I know I scrolled this away probably. I mean, this is, yeah, here, there is, it's, this state is really sad, especially for such a high profile. I mean, at least the drivers are in the Linux kernel. It's something just doesn't work, and that is. I also wonder why they don't have new downloads here. I mean, maybe they have them somewhere, but I didn't instantly found them. Maybe they're to peel out of. Here's by the way something. Maybe you can peel this out of there, by the way. Here they actually have some newer releases, 2020. I'm also not sure if it's like really normal not to have releases for like 2 years then. Do they have a kernel? How to download? Do they have a, yeah, anyway, maybe I try to peel a newer kernel out of their whatever kernel. Maybe they ship 4.8 or whatever the last thing there was. Yeah, that's basically something. Also the problem a little bit, I thought 3 years ago, I was a little bit naive. I thought we can make here some open source, low level and development stuff. Of course, the last year it was pretty T2 hefty because I just wanted to get T2 in the best possible shape I could get and attract new developers and make more progress, which of course was amazing. But the problem is, like, even like resurrecting this, right? I probably spent 8 hours in total, some hours last year to get it to turn on again at all, including a full disassembly. Maybe I think I made some video, and now the battery, which I spent this time, should I make a video now? The problem is also that people sue me when their house burns down. OLPC. I think I had some disassembly video maybe. Where is... Oh, 8 months ago even they made a video about this. Didn't even know that. So yeah, there are some videos here, disassembly look inside. So the crazy stuff is because there's also a firmware bug in the early firmwares of the OLPC that if the RTC battery fully discharges, it doesn't turn on anymore, which I think was the case in mine. But the crazy thing is that I disassembled it, I soldered this very thin serial adapter. I think I even had to order that. It's even some 1.8, I'm not sure if it was 3.3 or 1.8 TTL level, that I had to buy a matching IC for and solder that together. And then it even, after all of this, like after I spent like 4 hours on this thing, it started to work by itself. Crazy it is. So I didn't even have to run this serial console, OK prompt, open firmware stuff that was in the, that was crazy. But yeah, now I have that, had this disassembled. Here, UNBRICKED. Is it mine? Oh, that is mine. There you have it. It's, hey, it's 3 freaking years ago. Yeah, 3 years later, I finally unbricked the battery. And hope you learned something. Maybe I try to load this image and peel it apart and see if I can get some new kernel out of that. Anyway, but the problem is with this stuff, like it's way too time consuming, right? If you basically, it's too niche, too few people watch it. It takes like easily 8 hours in which you could make a latest Apple, MacBook, Lenovo ThinkPad reviewer stuff, which 100,000 people watch, which of course I have some of those videos. And that is the issue with my channel concept, obviously, totally aware of that, right? Too niche and time consuming product. Basically, every review, like basically financing open source with this work, doesn't really quite work out. As amazing as it is that we have nearly 10,000 subscribers on the moment channel there. But of course it doesn't scale, right? You can't like burn 8 or 16 hours on just some OLPC recovery thing, and at the end kernel doesn't boot and stuff. And yeah. Anyway, that's it for tonight. I hope you have an amazing day. Don't forget to hydrate in this global climate crisis, heat waves. Don't forget to share, subscribe, and I hope to see you soon for the next fun stuff to come.